The LA Clippers blew an 18-point lead in Orlando on Wednesday night and fell to the Magic even with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. How did it all go so wrong? Gonna be talking about all that and more on today's Locked On Clippers.
Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day. Your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. I am your host, Darian Vaziri. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod, and of course, subscribe to my own YouTube channel where I also talk Clippers basketball and more sports content at YouTube, known as Dime Dropper, and of course, subscribe to Locked On Clippers on YouTube. And ask today's question: what did you think of that minutes restriction those minutes restriction shenanigans to end the game in this one? Because we're going to be talking about a lot of things, starting with the overtime period, the weird minutes restriction controversy, as well as the poor performances of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George individually and the game as a whole. So let's get right into it. Clippers were up by 18 in this game, but it was very early, so you knew the Orlando Magic were going to come back. As for who the Clippers had and they didn't have, had Paul George, had Kawhi Leonard, no Marcus Morris Sr. with a non-COVID-related illness, and then John Wall missing the first of a back-to-back in Miami on Thursday night. So he will be playing on Thursday, didn't play in this game. And then Luke Kennard was also out, just a precautionary measure. He just came back from an injury. And Norman Powell is still out with that groin injury. So, you still expect the Clippers to go into Orlando and get a win over a 5-20 team. But that was not to be the case on Wednesday night. And in the beginning, it was a great start. Clippers were up by 18. And the main reason they were off to a great start was because of Paul George. Going to be talking about his individual performance more as the episode continues, mainly in segment 2. But let's just go right to the nitty-gritty and what lost the Clippers the game. So the Clippers let the Magic get back into the game. You knew they were going to make some runs. I think the Clippers went through some cold spells because Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are still they're not being staggered right now. They're both going out at the same time. So when they're not in and we don't have John Wall, Norman Powell, or Marcus Morris, that's a lot of shot making and shot creating that's not there for the Clippers. So it was really Reggie Jackson with either Moses Brown or Ivica Zubac, and then 3 wings like Terrence Mann, Amir Coffey, Robert Covington, or Nico. And those guys aren't creators. So a lot of times in those lineups, it was kind of just Reggie Jackson, go create for the Clippers. And he didn't have a very good game, Reggie. And he hasn't been having, he did have a stretch where he was starting to play better, and he has been playing better lately, but last couple of games, not great. And in this one, he was 5 for 20. 5 for 20, which was also the most shot attempts of any Clipper player. More than Kawhi, more than Paul George. And if you're wondering the minutes disparity, it wasn't much. Reggie Jackson played 31 minutes, Kawhi Leonard played 30, and Paul George played 33. Now, I know what you may be thinking. Kawhi Leonard played 30 minutes? Yes. But let's talk about what went wrong. The Clippers went into the fourth quarter with a 7-point lead and could not really hold on. They went cold, and Paul George and Kawhi Leonard started going cold and weren't closing out the game like we saw against Charlotte the other night. Just were missing shots. But what I thought was peculiar was that Ty Lue took out the guy who may have been the Clippers' best player on Wednesday to close the game, and that was Terrence Mann. Terrence Mann not only made a couple of threes in the first quarter, was getting to the basket, just having a really good Terrence Mann game. 19 points for him, 7 for 10 shooting, 3 for 5 from 3, 9 rebounds, 4 assists. He played 37 minutes, which was the most of any Clipper, tied with Ivica Zubac. and was really good. But for whatever reason, he didn't close the game. Ty wanted to close with Reggie. Even though the ball is going through Kawhi Leonard and Paul George more, I think he wanted Reggie's catch and shoot threat. But Terrence Mann's ability to cut to the basket and the way he was shooting the ball, mixed with his defense, mixed with his ability to fight for rebounds and get potential second chance opportunities, far outweighs what Reggie Jackson was doing on this particular night. Probably going to be talking more about that decision as the episode continues. But we go to overtime, right? I'm like, okay. Kawhi Leonard, by the way, at the end of regulation, I want to say with 30 seconds left or something, missed a fall away that was well defended. I think it was Paolo Banchero guarding him. Well defended. He basically airballed. And then the Clippers still got another chance. Paul George missed a right wing three that for a second I thought, even though he was going full speed, coming the length of the court, so I didn't think it was going to go in. But from the TV angle, you thought maybe it could, but it was short. And then we go to overtime, right? And the craziest thing was that we start overtime and Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are not on the court. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, they probably hit a cap in their minutes restriction, huh? So we're not going to go for the win? And again, it's like that conversation again. Does this regular season game matter in the grand scope of things? Probably not. But how long are we going to keep saying this? Each loss that we shouldn't have. The two against OKC in the beginning of the season. This one. The game against Sacramento we played, which I wouldn't even say that was a bad loss. It was just the fashion in which we lost that game that was terrible. But there are a lot of these games that we keep saying, well, it's not going to matter down the line. These games add up when you finally are seeded at the end of the season. These games add up. I remember in 2014 or 13, the Clippers could have gotten, I remember one or two games at the beginning of the season that were very winnable. And I remember going back in April and saying, man, if we had just won those two games against Cleveland and Golden State in November, I think we could have maybe been the 2 seed instead of the 3 and not have to play Golden State in the first round. Or, I'm sorry, Memphis in the first round. And we ended up losing to Memphis. But the thing is, right now there's such a logjam in the Western Conference that no team is really gaining separation. The Phoenix Suns are doing pretty well, but they just got destroyed by the Mavericks the other night. So no team in the West looks very good. But the East, Milwaukee and especially Boston, who the Clippers are playing on Monday, and I am not looking forward to that because the way they're playing right now with the hunger that they're playing, that could get ugly quickly for the Clippers because they are making work of a lot of teams. By the way, speaking of the Phoenix Suns, they also got destroyed on Wednesday by the Celtics at home. So Celtics are flying. No Western Conference team is flying. So that's a good sign. If you want something positive to take from this, Clipper fans, it's that no team in the West is looking very good right now. Everybody's struggling and getting some bad losses that they don't expect to get. But at the same time, I don't really care about anybody else. I'm talking about the Clippers. And it's that conversation again. Minutes restriction, prioritizing health so much. And it's not like when I say prioritizing health, people want to twist it and be like, so you want them to play and get injured? How do you know they're going to get hurt? And how do you know they're not going to get hurt if they play? That's the problem. It's the probability thing. And at this point, judging by the post-game press conferences and post-game quotes by Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, they're starting to become fed up with it either. This is Paul George's quote. You understand the medical side of it, where this is my second game back from a hamstring injury, and we got another one tomorrow night, so I get it. It's just tough. It's tough. Competitive side takes over, and I want to compete, and we got ourselves in a tough finish. As one of the leaders, I want to be out there and help close the game out. So there you go, Paul George's take on it. Here's Kawhi. They're just trying to protect, I guess, us as players. At times I feel like we should be in close quarters out like the end of that third. But like I said, I guess medical staff is just trying to protect us as players. At least me, because it's my second game back. Hopefully we can get beyond this and we can just play basketball. That's Kawhi. So at the end of the day, they seem to be getting frustrated with it. But here's the craziest part. They didn't even stay true to the minutes restriction. I thought we were done seeing Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And, the Clippers were still right there neck and neck in the overtime. Ivica Zubac had an and one. Nico Batum, if I'm not mistaken, he had some nice dunks on cuts. 2 dunks, I think, either in the fourth quarter or overtime, where he cut to the basket beautifully and was found for dunks. And Nico was also just amazing in this game. We ruined 2 really good performances, one by Nico and one by Terrence Mann. Both of them were just fantastic, combined for 33 points between the two of them. But Kawhi Leonard comes in with a minute left in the game. A minute left in the game. So we're down by a point, and Kawhi Leonard's coming back in. And I'm thinking to myself, so now we want to put him in? apparently Kawhi Leonard had 1 minute left on his, minutes restriction. Before he gets the cap, he had 1 minute left. So we just thrust him out there for the biggest minute of the game. It's just so weird. And then the most peculiar of all, Paul George was apparently capped. He was done. Because he's also playing against Miami on Wednesday nights, or Thursday night, which is great. I'm very happy that Paul George is playing, but it's like he's playing a back-to-back, but he's on a minutes restriction. It's just weird. Like, if you don't want to work your players that hard, then don't play him on a back-to-back. But we're going to sit him out for 4.5 minutes of an overtime against Orlando, and then we're going to put him in for the last 30 seconds down 3. So weird. And so the Clippers go down 3. They just have mental lapses, and Paolo Banchero, who the Clippers did an amazing job of guarding in this game. He did not have a great game, Banchero, and he's averaging 21 points a game. He ended up having 23 points, but a couple of those came in overtime. He wasn't playing that well. And 2 of them were uncontested, like layups, and it was a layup and a dunk. And I think it's because we put in an entirely new lineup after regulation. So high stakes minutes, not high stakes basketball, but high intensity minutes. And you got a whole new lineup in there. Of course, they're going to have some defensive communication breakdowns. So we go down 3, and Paul George gets thrust back into the game. Zubats has fouled out, so Moses Brown is out there. And I don't know what the play was that was drawn up by Ty Lue, but Moses Brown didn't set very good screens, and nobody popped out to get open for the Clippers, and they got a 5-second violation. And I don't even blame Nico Batum, really. I mean, yes, you got to throw the ball in, but he had no real option to throw the ball to, and it was just disgraceful to have a 5-second violation. That being said, the Clippers still got the ball back, tried a little length of the floor pass to tie the game, to try to get a good shot. And Paul George threw the ball out of bounds over the head of any Clipper players. And the Clippers lost 116 to 111. It was so weird. It's like, are they restricted minutes-wise, or are they not? Are you going to go for the win, or are you going to accept defeat and just say, you know what, they can't play, we're going to bring them back the next game? I have so much to say, and I'm going to keep saying it. I'm also going to be talking about their individual performances, because it wasn't just a minutes restriction fiasco that cost the Clippers the game. They should have never been there in the first place, and I'm going to tell you what went wrong coming up. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available? That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. I found my Rams ambassador job on LinkedIn, and I'm attending a game tonight because of that job here on Thursday. If you want to hire people, just add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you listen to Locked On Sports today on Thursday, you will be seeing a familiar face for a couple of minutes. So check out Locked On Sports Today. Your boy was on there to talk about this atrocity of a loss for the Clippers. Sorry if that sounds dramatic, but it's a terrible loss. It's a terrible loss, especially because Kawhi Leonard and Paul George were playing in this game, and Kawhi Leonard and Paul George didn't play very well. And the reason, you might be wondering, how did the Clippers go up by 18 points? How did they lead 32-14 after the first quarter? Well, I think the defense was actually pretty good all game. I think you saw a heavy implementation of zone for the Clippers, and it was actually working. The Magic just weren't really breaking through it. And I think that the way NBA teams in this day and age attack zones is so terrible. I think it's so low IQ personally. I know that sounds weird. Who are you to say that when you have NBA coaches out there? I'm comparing it to the previous NBA. I'm just comparing it to what I grew up watching. Because you go back and watch a late 2000s game or an early 2010s game, and you see how teams did not really go to blatant zones that much because they would get carved apart. You go back and watch those Laker teams with Kobe and Gasol. They used to put Gasol at the high post with the shooters on the outside, Fisher, Kobe, and Vladimir Radmanovic or Ariza, whoever they had. And they would put Bynum in the dunker spot, Gasol on the high post, and carve them apart. Even the Clippers, Chris Paul, Redick, and Barnes on the perimeter. Blake Griffin, how many of those times do we see that high-low lob action with Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan? Whether it be on pick and rolls or when teams went to the occasional zone. Blake Griffin, lob up to DeAndre from the foul line. It was just, it's what I think it is everyone sits on the perimeter now. Nobody wants to go to that high post area, and you're not breaking zones down in terms of getting the ball in the middle of the floor. I played against 2-3 zones probably more than any defense in my youth sports career. And the way you break 2-3 zones is spacing the floor out well with some shooters, but you also have to have a high post man to break that zone down. And no one tends to go there. They just still want to run pick and roll offense and attack the gaps. And yes, that creates a lot of open threes or semi-contested threes or good looks from three, but you're doing what the defense wants. And the objective of a 2-3 zone is, one, to take away your clear-cut pick and roll looks, two, to not let guys go one-on-one, and three, to keep you outside of the painted area and take those threes. And I think the Clippers actually did a decent job combating the zone, not with the way I'm saying, with putting Zubats or somebody at the high post, but just because Paul George was hitting shots straight up in the beginning of the game. And Paul George hitting shots is why the Clippers were winning. So overall, Clippers only allowed 99 points in regulation. That is good. That is good. So the defense wasn't a problem, and the defense has been pretty good throughout the season. But it was the offense yet again. The offense yet again that just let the Clippers down. And I think that's because the stars cooled down. You know, Paul George in the first quarter had like 10 points right away. 10 points. You know, was just looking like Paul George. For the rest of the game, this guy had 1 point. 1 point. He started out by scoring the second basket of the Clippers game. And mind you, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George each had the first three baskets of this game for the Clippers. Paul George had 7 points. I kid you not. 7 points at the 8:54 mark of the first quarter. You want me to take it a step higher? He had 10 points at the 7:49 mark of the first quarter. So for the rest of the game, he scored 1 point. Forget the minutes restriction. If you want to really point to why the Clippers lost this game, one of the biggest reasons is Paul George, when Kawhi Leonard is on the court, continues to act like he's got the offensive talent of an OG Anunoby or an Andrew Wiggins. And that is nothing to take away from those players or a Mikal Bridges or these kind of really good role players. In Andrew Wiggins' case, a little better than a role player. You are Paul George. You are one of the most gifted scorers at the wing position that this game has ever seen. You are averaging over 20 points a game. Right now, Paul George is the best player on this team. Right now, at this current moment. Kawhi Leonard is still working his way back. He is still getting his legs underneath him. Paul George is the best player on this team, and he needs to start acting like it. The amount of minutes that would go by between each shot attempt was appalling. You can't have 10 points and then only score 1 the rest of the game. That's unacceptable. Unacceptable. He had 12 shot attempts. He made 3 of them. Guess how many shot attempts Reggie Jackson had? 20. He had 8 more shots than Paul George, and Paul George played 2 more minutes than him. And I guarantee you, it's not a guarantee. I'm telling you right now, if you didn't watch the game, those were not all shots in the flow of the offense by Reggie Jackson. A lot of them were contested jumpers, shots that, as I described in the Charlotte game, not fully open, semi-contested threes that could have been passed up. He shot 20 times. Kawhi Leonard shot 15 times. And by the way, Kawhi, another inefficient scoring night, 4 for 15. But again, I know you might be saying, how long are you going to keep saying that he's getting his legs underneath him? For a little while, honestly. This is a serious injury that he's coming back from. You need to give Kawhi Leonard time. It's okay with him missing shots. 4 for 15. It's fine. Okay? He needs to have these games because eventually he's going to get back to his old self. Now, the one positive for Kawhi Leonard shooting the ball was you saw him make some threes. 2 of them, as a matter of fact. 2 out of 6. So I know it's not a great percentage, but considering he's shooting like 10% from three so far. For him to shoot 33% is a step up. And I'll tell you this is a positive. His legs look good when he was shooting those threes, especially that second one he hit when he was pulling up on the break, top of the key. It looked beautiful. It didn't look like he forced it with his legs. It was awesome. It was a fluid shot, and that's a positive thing. So expect to see Kawhi Leonard hit more threes now. I would say that. But Paul George and Kawhi Leonard were a combined 7 for 27. And when Reggie Jackson is shooting 5 for 20 and you don't have Norman Powell, Marcus Morris, or Luke Kennard, or John Wall, it's going to be tough because, as I said, when Kawhi and Paul came out of the game together, it was Reggie and a bunch of wings with a big. And those aren't necessarily lineups that are optimizing shot creation. So I think when you look at why the Clippers only scored 17 points in the second, why they only scored 21 in the fourth, a lot of it is because they went cold and also started turning the ball over too much. 15 turnovers in this game, 12 for Orlando. 15 isn't that bad considering there's an overtime and what we've seen from the Clippers so far this season in certain games, turning the ball over. But when you want to look at a couple of reasons why the Clippers lost. First segment, I talked about the minutes restriction fiasco. What's going on there? I mean, it feels weird for me because it's like, why should I get so emotionally invested in this game when they're not going to do whatever it takes to win as the medical staff, coaching staff? They're not. They're not doing whatever it takes to win because if they did, they would just play Kawhi Leonard and Paul George a little bit past their restriction for the 5 minutes. If you're really that scared they're going to get injured in that time, fine. It's just not. Then don't put him back in. Don't put him back in. Throwing Kawhi Leonard back in for 1 minute, like, okay, I get it. Like, I would do the same thing if I was told by the medical staff he can't play over this amount. But Paul George coming back into the game is just weird. It's just weird. But mainly, it should have never gone to overtime. Never. Paul George and Kawhi Leonard didn't shoot well. For Kawhi Leonard, I'm okay with it. He's not going to shoot well. But Reggie Jackson needs to relax. And Ty Lue is not making it any better by leaving Reggie Jackson in the game when Terrence Mann's having that good of a game. And then Reggie Jackson sits in overtime. Like, I just don't get it. I just don't get it. But Paul George, moral of the story, he needs to act like a freaking star. It's unacceptable how passive he's been this season at times. Come on, Paul. Be better. Do better. He will be better. Coming up, going to talk about the other performances, how the other role players do. How did Moses Brown do in his 15 minutes? Going to be talking about all that to close the show coming up. All right, so talked about the stars plenty. Let's talk about the other guys. Terrence Mann came off the bench and was awesome. 19 points. He made his open threes, 3 for 5, as I said. Got to the basket when he could. He had 4 offensive rebounds, played hard defense, just doing what Terrence Mann does, and he was just awesome. As for Nico Batum, another really strong performance. He was good against Charlotte. He was really good against Orlando. He played in 38 minutes, actually. So, God, I made a mistake. When I said Terrence Mann and Zubats played the most minutes on the team, I didn't see Nico Batum played 38. So Nico actually played the most minutes on the team. He played 38 minutes. He had 16 points, 4 rebounds, and 5 assists. He was really making the perfect extra passes at times. Just very smart game from him. 0 turnovers as well. The only starter who did not turn the ball over once. 16 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 6 for 11 from the field, 4 for 9 from 3. He's been really good lately, and that's a great sign. I just think it's funny that Nico Batum just can play 38 minutes, and then he's going to play again on Thursday night against Miami, and he's the oldest player on the team. Like, it's just, I get it. The top earners get the highest level of security in terms of their bodies and the biggest prioritization, but it's just not fair. It's just not fair in my opinion. But Nico Batum, shout out to him. He played great. Had some really nice cuts to the basket and dunks off of them. Just really intelligent movement by him. But again, I don't think you can blame Nico at all. Like, he played great. Him and Terrence Mann really played great. Kawhi Leonard had 14 points and 7 boards. He also turned the ball over 4 times. I think there were times in this game where Reggie Jackson and Kawhi in particular missed the open man on their pick and roll reads, or like just on rotations, meaning offensive swinging the ball rotations, ball reversals. They could have made the extra pass or just missed the guy wide open, and the Magic had a lot of length out there, I might add. Like Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, Bull, who I'm really happy for, by the way. Really happy to see Bull playing and showing what he can do at this level, because one of my best friends went to college with him and played with him at Oregon. And he said that he would tell me stories about Bull in practice, about how insane some of the things this guy would do were. And so it's great to see him play. But the Magic, they had a lot of length out there. So when the Clippers weren't swinging the ball quick, that 1 second where you don't pass the ball, you take an extra dribble, or you think a little bit about the pass, they were recovering. And I think Kawhi Leonard and Reggie Jackson kind of missed some guys on those reads. And Kawhi Leonard was, as I said, 14 points, 7 boards, 4 turnovers, on 4 for 15 shooting, and 2 for 6 from deep. What's good is he's made all 4 of his free throws. But Kawhi and Paul George combined for 25 points between the two of them. Nico Batum and Terrence Mann combined for 35 because Terrence had 19, Nico had 16. So those guys did their thing. Reggie Jackson, I talked about, was awful. I think he needs to just shoot better shots, and I think Ty Lue just needs to play him less. I think it's nothing against Reggie personally. I love Reggie Jackson. I think he cares more about this organization and the fans than maybe any player on the team. But our team is just too good for him to be playing this many minutes. Even without, Kennard, Norman, John Wallen Sr. I think that Coffey, who, he was minus 25 and played 19 minutes and only scored 3 points. I mean, he was out there in overtime. But I'd still rather have him play a little more. Robert Covington, I also thought, played a decent game. I think he actually had some bad moments where he was not doing really anything on defense. And, got blown by once or twice. And on offense, he was just a passenger. But he did have a nice stretch for a little bit in the second half where he hit a 3 on the break. And he had 10 points, 4 for 9 from the field, 2 for 6 from deep. Thought he was okay. All the bench players for the Clippers were in the minus category, in the plus minus, which, again, I don't think is a very accurate representation of how well they played. Moses Brown, for example, played in 15 minutes in the game, had 7 points and 8 rebounds and 3 blocks, and didn't turn the ball over one time, was 3 for 6. The only thing you could say about Moses was on defense, yes, they did take advantage at times, but they also actually took advantage of Zoo a little bit in this game, too, in the pick and roll. I thought that they just made some nice shots in pick and roll. Not much, I wouldn't say it was horrendous defense. I think Moses Brown and Ivica Zubac, each of them had a possession or two where they backed off a little too far on a certain ball handler and they got burned with a floater or something or a layup. But overall, they were okay. Moses Brown, I actually thought he was pretty good. 5 offensive rebounds. He had 3 blocks. He had 7 points in 15 minutes. He also had the best plus minus of any of the bench players, which again, it's not saying much, but it was only -3. And again, plus minus for an individual game is very based on, not even just for an individual game. It's very based on who else is out there on the floor against you, with you. I think Moses Brown was actually okay. Would I rather have Moussa Diabate not with the G League and playing instead of Moses? Absolutely. But I don't think Moses Brown was at fault for the game. I think he made one bad play on that late inbounds where he didn't set very good screens and the Clippers had a 5-second violation. But I think the other guys did enough. And my friend, I was watching with one of my friends, Clipper fan, and he was saying the role players are ready. And some might disagree, but I think the role players are ready. I think the role players are as good as a supporting cast you can get around the league. I think you can complain about the thinness of the front line for the Clippers coming off the bench, but I think Moses Brown has shown that he can give some solid minutes against certain teams. And I think Moussa Diabate has been really great and needs to be playing more. But it's really all about Kawhi Leonard and Paul George getting back into form. I think what just really makes me angry about this loss is Reggie Jackson shooting 20 shots. 5 more than the stars on the Clippers, 5 more than any next player on the Clippers shot, and 8 more than Paul George, even though he played less minutes. That just makes me so livid. But at the same time, Paul George needs to take accountability for this one. Ty Lue needs to take accountability for this one, more for the fact that he persists with Reggie Jackson and has this conviction I talked about in so many episodes, instead of Terrence Mann, who, I get it, maybe you don't want to let him play 40 minutes, but you don't know the game's going to go to overtime at the end of the regulation. You don't know that. You could have played Terrence Mann at the end, and who knows what could have happened. But they went into overtime. You had the whole minutes restriction thing. It sucks because you just know they're not going all out to win games. And what you might say, which a lot of people might say, why would you go all out to win games in December? You're right. I just can't wait till we're in January, February and seeing what our record is and me being able to either say I told you so or you were right. I hope I'm saying you were right and I was wrong. But I just feel like every game adds up. It adds up to me. But anyway, Clippers lose at 116-111. They go again on Thursday against Miami. The Miami Heat are not playing good basketball right now. They're 11-14. They've struggled with their own injury problems. I'm not sure if Jimmy Butler's going to play. He's been out here and there, and apparently he's not even playing back-to-backs anymore. But it won't be an easy game. You know, Miami's a tough place to play, and the Clippers haven't had too much success against them. At least last season, they lost in Miami. But the season before was when the Canoes went in and got the job done with no Kawhi Leonard or Paul George. They will have Paul George in this game, which, again, is a little weird considering he was on a minutes restriction. But he'll play, and I'm happy he's playing. So Clippers go again on Thursday. That means you will have a Friday pod out for the post game. Clippers lose at 111-116, drop to 14-12. Again, I'm Darian Vaziri. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod. And, of course, subscribe to Locked On Clippers and comment on today's pinned question. What did you think of the whole minutes restriction fiasco? How does it make you feel? What did you think of it? Let me know everything and more in the comments. Vent all your frustrations. Vent all your opinions. I want to hear it. Make sure to subscribe to my own YouTube channel at Dime Dropper for even more. And peace. Go Clippers. Age-old proverb. Can't forget that.